Good evening. I'm incredibly excited to be here, not only because I love to talk about this topic, but because clearly this is an incredibly groovy group. And I don't always get to speak to groups like this when you have a musical interlude before you get on stage. Couldn't be any better if we tried. Again, as Julia said, I'm Ashley Grice. I'm the CEO of a company called BrightHouse, which is a purpose-driven consulting organization that was founded in the 90s, if you can believe that. So the first time that I started working there was in '03, and I've been dedicating the last 15 years to talking about purpose. And so to be here and to listen to these stories of Paolo and Louise about what they're doing at their corporations absolutely makes my heart sing. It brings me a lot of joy. One thing they didn't mention, however, is how incredibly difficult purpose is. It's an incredibly difficult endeavor to undertake. And so one of my pet peeves, I would say, in this market is that when you execute purpose flawlessly, people think it's really easy. They're like, oh, I could do that. I can completely do that. I can come in and do some brainstorming and come up with something that talks about my reason for being and how important that is. But it's actually easy in the way that Swan Lake dancers or ballerinas make looking like swans on stage easy, right? Or international travel, when I have two teenage children at home, look easy, right? On the execution side, it might look flawless, but there is running behind the scenes, there is logistics behind the scenes, there is blood, and there is sweat, and there's a lot of tears behind the scenes of getting purpose to light. And in fact, in my line of work, I have made or seen more grown men and women cry than you can possibly imagine. I have to carry a hanky in my backpack. Why do you think that is? I mean, this is Wall Street executives, this is steely-eyed female CEOs, German engineers. That's always the most awkward, right? Why do you think they cry these big crocodile tears coming down their little executive faces? Because they understand their lives, right? Because they've seen for the first time their reason that they're placed on this earth. They understand for just a moment what their legacy is going to be about. Or maybe they think about for the first time what their kids and their grandkids are going to say about them or brag about them when they're gone. In a lot of ways, coming to that brink of tears, nothing brings you there more than really understanding your reason for being. And purpose allows them and their corporations to have their moment. Purpose is also having its moment. So for me, again, working on this since '03, back in the day, I spent a lot of my time trying to explain to companies what purpose was versus why it should be implemented and when they get the quote-unquote ROI from it, which is what I talk about now, much more now than I used to, right? Didn't really understand that behind the purpose piece came all sorts of research and back end, and then the fact it's a big leap for you to take. So again, back in '03, it was the iconoclasts who did this, right? It was the people who were true visionaries. It was the folks who felt this like visceral tug for a North Star in their soul. It was the earliest of early adopters. It was the absolute brave people. And frankly, a lot of the time we were really scoffed at for dealing in the soft stuff. Now, I don't know if you all know or are familiar with Larry Fink. Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock. He's CEO of one of the largest money management companies in the world, and this is what he's saying about purpose. Without a sense of purpose, no company can achieve its full potential, okay? Now, just go ahead and look up Larry Fink on Google for a second. If you only look at his face, not a guy into the soft stuff, right? You can absolutely tell. But he's had it a little bit easy too, right? Now we've got all these studies and this data that says that purpose actually works beautifully for companies when implemented well. You've got reduced attrition, great retention. You've got total shareholder value over 10-year horizons up by 400%. You've got all of these studies that indicate if you have a satisfied employee versus an inspired employee, the productivity raise is 225%. If you want to talk about transformation and unlocking discretionary effort in your company to make a big difference, that's how you do it. So Larry had a little bit easy, right? It's not the soft stuff anymore, and in fact, purpose now has edge. Purpose is popular, which for someone like me is also fantastic and simultaneously scares the hell out of me. Because when something's incredibly popular, you always get imitators that jump on board, right? And with imitators, sometimes you get fantastic products, but sometimes you get very poorly made product, right? And so let's say for the sake of argument, I'm making a $20 pair of earphones, and I put them on, and the sound's okay, and the quality isn't quite right, but you know what? It's 20 bucks. It's earphones. I can still hear my music. I'm okay with it. Now I want you to imagine you've got someone who makes that quote-unquote earphones, but I've promised to show them their reason for being, and it's a shoddy product. How does that make you feel? Ouch. That really hurts. And when we get into something like that, when you have people who actually don't deliver well on purpose, there's an enormous risk. And I'm going to go ahead and put it out there that I think purpose as I know it in some ways right now is dying. And I want to see people get galvanized around making this real and impactful and soulful, right? The risk that we run is that you get purpose washing. Like we got greenwashing, right? All of a sudden, sustainability is really key, and everybody's out there, and they say, I do this, but they actually don't do it well. And then the whole movement comes into a level of cynicism that you haven't seen. If we don't do this right, if we don't take this to heart, right, it's going to become corporatized. It will be productized. It will be a copy-written cover for the same corporate ladders that we've been pulling for a really long time. And so this is one of the things that keeps me up at night when I talk about purpose. So then I think to myself, okay, knowing that this is the case, right, it's become popular, how do I go ahead and resolve against that? I think there's two ways that we can keep purpose real and keep it eloquent and keep it effective. The first one is make sure it is raw and uncomfortable. One of the things about purpose is that you have to look at your corporation and think about what do you do incredibly well, and how does that intersect with what types of things can you offer the world, right? Something Louise said when she was talking about Airbus. How do we apply this to the world? Oftentimes when you look at yourselves, you'll see a lot of strengths, right? The things that people will come to you and ask advice about, but there's also a fair amount of flaws. And focusing on fallibility for people is incredibly uncomfortable, right? It makes them queasy, kind of like this slide behind me. Makes people really queasy. But that being said, sometimes shining light on brutal truths can be brutal, but without tension, nobody makes behavioral change. Every cultural anthropologist will tell you that's the case, right? There has to be a human push, a drive, not in the soul, but also in the behavior to make change that actually makes things like this real. So keep purpose raw, embrace that dissonance, and be willing to look at that discord within yourself, and then do something about it. The second piece that I would argue on keeping purpose effective is to hunt down those white whales. Now, when I talk about white whale corporations, what I mean are corporations in oil and gas, right, that can solve the dual energy crisis we're all worried about in climate change. Companies in pharmaceuticals, for example, who might be able to completely change communicable disease around the world, or even, you know, today, I'm an American, I've been watching midterm elections from afar, political parties, right? Organizations inside countries, governments, these types of organizations that can really make big and vast change by sheer size and reach. These are the white whales that I'm talking about. Now, the reason I care so much about them is I have a background in business, yes, but I also have a background in public health. And to me, white whales are the definition of what I call a beneficial externality. So for those of you who are economists, right, you would know that a beneficial externality is when a third party benefits from an economic transaction of somebody else. On layman's terms, right, let's say my fine friend in the front, if I am vaccinated against polio, but you opt not to do that, by the sheer fact that I am vaccinated, you are healthier while being around me, right? That's an example of a beneficial externality that we all understand. In other layman's terms, it's something I would call a ripple effect, right? So if I go after these enormous companies, these big white whales that have the breadth and the reach to get consumers at the very last mile, right? That takes this massive span of purpose and puts it everywhere out there, especially if I can get them motivated to keep it raw and real, to look at themselves internally and really think about the things that not only keep them up at night, but the things that get them excited in the morning to get out of bed. So purpose, I would say, is in its 15 minutes of fame, right? And if we do this well, and we're honest with ourselves, and as leaders, we look into our souls, and we're willing to admit our human fallibility, that's how you turn 15 minutes of fame into 15 millennia of fame, right? Keep it raw, keep it brutal, keep it honest, and man, go after those big ones. right? Take a lot of time looking for the biggest and the baddest and the dirtiest ones that you can find. You know, this is a conversation I have inside our company all the time, where, to be honest, a lot of millennial generation that works for me gets very anxious about working for companies that they deem have bad reputations. And I say, let's get them. Those are the ones I want, right? Those are the people in high school your dad didn't want you to date. I want to go find that person, and I want to absolutely convert them to the other side. Because if I only take the good guys and convert them to be even better, right, I've completely missed the point. So I ask that we, because we are leaders in thought and mind, we are leaders in holistic business, embrace the dissonance and keep it real. And we will take that purpose for good and expand it in terms of impact as far as it will go. Thank you.
Super.